For somebody who doesn't know what Forbidden Broadway is, what is it?
Forbidden Broadway is one of the longest running off-Broadway shows, and it parodies all of the Broadway shows. So you're hearing the original music with parody lyrics. And as I like to say, you always hurt the ones you love. And it's, it's a brutal look at the reality of some of the shows and some of the stars that have performed in them.
So for Forbidden Broadway, the next generation, are you focusing, is my assumption correct, on newer shows or still a mix of both?
It is a mix of classics that everyone will know with a healthy smattering of things that have just recently played or are still playing or touring.
So what are some of the shows that you'll be featuring?
So we do Chicago, Les Mis, Jersey Boys, Phantom. There's an homage to Cheetah and Rita, Cheetah Rivera and Rita Moreno. But we also have Beetlejuice, Frozen, Moulin Rouge. So there's a very healthy smattering of current shows as well as the classics that everybody is familiar with.
From a personal note, as we were talking before, I've seen Forbidden Broadway about 3 or 4 times, different iterations of it. And I had seen Forbidden Broadway doing Les Mis before I had ever seen Les Mis.
Yeah.
And even though I really didn't know what you were alluding to, it was one of the funniest things I have ever seen.
Yeah.
I don't want to take away.
Yeah, it still kills, I have to say. That, and I have had that experience myself where I have actually done the numbers before I've ever seen the original shows. And in very few circumstances, it didn't kill it for me because all I could hear was, oh, right. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And I was going to ask is for people who may not know Broadway that in depth, it's still something that someone can enjoy because it's generally funny.
Absolutely. No questions asked. You just have to know that the show exists. You don't have to have seen any of these shows. Like you said, when you saw the Les Mis, and like I said, I've done a lot of these parodies before I ever saw the shows. And, it's written so well. The costumes were designed by the brilliant Alvin Colt, who's no longer with us, who designed the original Guys and Dolls. And the costumes themselves are also parodies. And so it's a visual and audio feast.
I read somewhere, and you'll have to tell me this is true, that there is like around 75 costume changes in the show. Have you
counted? That sounds pretty accurate.
So it's not just a parody. Like you're doing an off-Broadway, like it's a production.
Oh no, we each do between maybe 12 or 17 characters throughout the course of the show. So I always say, we travel with a dresser because, she has to know, and Rosalie's brilliant at what she does, and she has to, be up on it. If, God forbid anything goes wrong, help with the costume change. I've gotten dressed in a full-on costume for not the next number, but the number after that, and then heard the music for the next number and had to rip everything off and throw everything on and get on stage in about 9 seconds. Wow. I always say it's the miracle of Velcro.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
75, that's so impressive. Like, I'm just trying to think of all of that just shows just how many shows you're going to get through. I mean, not 75, but in terms of characters.
Yes. Well, even like within the Les Mis number, there are costume changes within the number for the same people, because there's only 4 of us. Right. You probably know there's 2 men and 2 women. We travel with the 4 actors, our musical director, our stage manager, and our dresser. So there's 7 of us who travel, but you see 5 of us on stage.
So this is for people who may not go see a Broadway show, but they want a little taste of Broadway, and then you get to laugh too at the same time.
Yes, and you're also hearing. I always like to say it's like you're hearing the music, but you're hearing maybe not the real lyrics, maybe the inner thoughts of the character, or the inner thoughts of the writer, or whomever's commenting on it. And you're still, there's some great voices in this show too, so you're going to be thoroughly entertained.
Yeah, I was gonna ask what your theater background. I mean, we talked about before this, but what your theater background is, because I saw some clips and you guys, it's not like you're messing around and they just pick people off the street. Y'all are very talented.
Oh yeah, you have to. Gerard picked a lot of very talented, vocal performers to do this, and also you have to be funny. You had to go through the whole audition process, callback thing, and you had to do impressions in your audition. Mine was, I crashed and burned. And after I sang, he said to me, I remember he said, "You have a very impressive voice. Are there any impressions you'd like to share with us?" And I thought this was going to be hilarious. And I went, "How many impressions do you want? 1, 2, 3. Ah, ah, ah." Zero reaction. And I was like, "Oh no, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God."
It's a classic, though. That's a classic.
I was like, it's the count. I was like, I'm gonna count how many. Zero reaction.
It's never good with an impression when you have to tell them who it is after. No,
yeah.
Sesame Street, not your.
Yeah, no, yeah. Not the right generation. Sorry about that.
So, what is your favorite show that you've done with Forbidden Broadway?
You mean what incarnation or what numbers that I do in the show?
I would say what number you do in the show.
I have to say my favorite number is Robert Goulet.
Oh goodness, I can't even imagine.
Yeah. From the costume to the wig to the mustache, to the parody itself, it's a blast to do. I mean, they're all so much fun, but that's when I'm out there by myself, just doing Robert Goulet, and that's a blast.
And you said that you had Broadway experience. What do you find this more challenging because you kind of have to have that comedic timing all the time, or what's the difference?
I mean, this thing is a whole nother animal, because when you're doing a book show and you're telling that story along the way, you're telling this story in anywhere from 30 seconds to 2.5 minutes. So, I mean, it is just so quickly paced. And I always say, once you get on that roller coaster, you just go for the ride, and it's over before you know it, because it's so frantic. You're just running the whole time, changing your clothes, your wigs, singing backup for other people. It's a lot more involved than most book shows.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, even if you have 75 costume changes in a show, they're probably a little bit more spread out in a Broadway show where you're just, having seen it, you're going show to show to show to show to show.
Yeah, because like I said, some of the numbers are only 30 seconds.
Right.
Some of them are 2.5 minutes, or some of them are, 6 minutes. Like the Les Mis section is a longer section with a bunch of songs. But some of them are just, lickety split. You're off there and you're in your next costume.
Is this the only iteration of Forbidden Broadway that you've done?
Oh, Lord, no.
Well, it good means you love it.
I started doing the show in 1996.
Oh, wow.
Was that 27 years or something? I had a friend that was doing it in Boston, and I had seen the original company in Boston. And unfortunately, we just lost one of the great ones, Michael McGraw, Tony Award winner, who I just done a benefit with him 2 weeks before he passed away. He was part of the original Broadway, the Boston company, and I saw he was such an inspiration, hugely talented, and is going to be greatly missed. But when I had a friend who was doing it when they revived it in Boston, and I had gotten a job offer to direct production of Pippin at the Boston Conservatory, which was my alma mater, and I had directed there the year before with a friend who was doing Forbidden Broadway. And when they called me and asked me to do it, I said I wasn't interested, but I called him and I said, if you're looking to direct, because he loved to direct, I said, you should call. And he did. And he called me the next day and he said, I'm directing Pippin. I said, what are you going to do about Forbidden Broadway? He said, I recommended you as my replacement. So we basically switched jobs in 1996, and I haven't really stopped doing it. I've done a couple of national tours, so I was gone for a year both times. But I always call this like my permanent temp job, because I jump right back into it when I'm not doing something else.
And it shows how entertaining it is that you want to keep doing that same thing and just keep returning to the same thing all the time.
Well, it's a blast to do. The audiences are always unbelievably responsive, and it has brought me all over this country and all over the world. It's really it's been a gift to me to experience this, and P.S. it's paying my mortgage.
That also helps.
Yeah, I don't do it for free.
As you shouldn't.
Yeah, but
Especially all the costume changes and the running around, you're getting your cardio, and that's a lot of work.
yeah, and like I said, it's brought me all over the world and all over this country. And who gets the opportunity to do that while they're working?
And making people laugh all the
Yeah.
time too. I saw an article that I thought was really interesting, and I don't know if you know this, so tell me if you do, but that when they were first writing Forbidden Broadway, that Stephen Sondheim kind of did his unofficial like seal of approval by sending some of his music to make sure that it was done correctly.
Well, I also heard that he told Gerard, "You can make it meaner."
Oh, wow.
From right out of his mouth, he said, the shows. He said, "You can make it meaner." I think that's the word he used was meaner.
Meaner. Because I think that's what's really cool is when you think of parodies or impressions, sometimes you kind of worry about what, especially in something like Broadway, where someone just poured their heart out on stage, what they think about. And to have someone like Stephen Sondheim say, no, I love this. Keep it
Yeah.
going. This is great. It must feel amazing.
Carol Channing, who was one of the original people that they parodied, saw the show all the time. I've never had the opportunity to have those people in the audience when I was doing it, but I've seen all the pictures of everybody that's ever been backstage. Even the current Broadway shows, or when they did it in Boston, the rent company came to see the show because there was a huge rent section at the time. But everybody comes and is always extremely supportive.
And it's really neat. As I said, like you always hear with people, and I equate it to like SNL because that's where most people are doing impressions.
Of course. Yes, absolutely.
Once that person comes on stage with them, you're like, oh, okay, so this is good. We're okay.
Well, it's also sort of like a badge of honor to be parodied in Forbidden Broadway, because you're like, oh, I've reached a certain pinnacle in my career that that they can make fun of me now.
Right, is true. Could you, just to tease our audience a little bit, give a couple of titles of songs and see we can kind of give them an idea of what they can expect with the show without giving anything crazy away?
Well, see, we don't have titles per se, like like a parody title of the number. It's just like, for instance, in the Lion King number, the character's name is Rafiki, but in our show it's Rafriki. But they're not really titled like you would see in I don't even think they have I don't think they even do it in a program. I
don't know. I know that there's been CDs of it before, but I don't know how they title them. Maybe it's just, here it is, enjoy.
Yeah, I'm trying, because because we do Book of Mormon, but it's just called Book of Mormon.
Right.
No, I lied. It is called something else.
I'll have to wait.
It's called Book of Morons.
I get that. I have an idea of what that's about.
Yeah. Which is also an extremely fun number to do.
Oh, I'm sure. Do you have like a favorite Broadway show that during Forbidden Broadway you've been able to? Because I know you said some of them you hadn't even seen.
Well, the cool thing about doing this is I'm getting to do roles that I would never be cast in. I mean, back in the day when we did the Miss Saigon number, I love that, and we, did the parody of a solo saxophone, which I always loved that song, and I was like, I'm never going to play this part, but I always got to do that. I got to do songs from Aida, which I was like, I'm never going to do that, but got to do that. So it's fun for us because, like I said, we're never going to play a lot of these roles, and I've aged out of most of them now.
Well, some of them also aren't on Broadway or touring anymore, so that's why.
That is very true.
Well, is there anything that you would want to tell people about Forbidden Broadway to make them come see the show if they still have little reservation or unsure about what it's about?
Forbidden Broadway is a laugh riot. Just come with your sense of humor because it is just so much fun. And as we do, once that roller coaster starts, you're going to go on this ride with us, and you're going to be very, very pleasantly surprised at how much you laugh during the show.
That Les Mis number is the funniest thing. My mom still talks about it years later, where she was like, Jess, you don't understand. This is hilarious. And I'm laughing, but it's just funny.
Well, we just did it outside Atlanta the other day, and we got to rehearsal, and we're like, do we need to go over Les Mis? And we're like, no, we don't really. No, we don't have to go over the Les Mis number. And we're in the middle of the number, and Chris and Penny kept rotating, but Chris was supposed to stop and sing the lead that we respond to.
Oh, no.
And I was standing there, I was like, where did he go? So I just started singing his lyrics, and then they started singing mine. In my head, I'm like, oh my God, what's the next line? And then, I mean, because I've done both parts, but it's been a minute. But thank God the lyrics just came out and they responded, and we covered it. The audience had zero idea anything had gone wrong, maybe except the fact that I was laughing through most of the lines that I was singing of his. But yeah.
Well, luckily with a parody, if you mess something up, the audience is probably like, oh, that's in the show.
Yeah, they are so long for that ride if something goes wrong.
It's so funny.
The other night I was doing the Phantom number, and this woman, there's always those experiences where there's just a little kind of a ridiculous laugh in the audience, or when they laugh when nobody else does. And I sing the number, and I inhaled, and this woman let out this cackle when nobody else, and I just went, and the audience just completely lost it. I had to like hold for about a minute. It was hysterical. So you're always hoping something like that happens.
Right. It's something like that, whether you're a Broadway, because I am a moderate Broadway fan. I go see Broadway a lot, but like a lot, I don't know the ins and outs, and a lot of the classics are a little lost on me from before I started paying and going myself.
Right.
But since, I mean, at that point I hadn't seen Les Mis, and even still, it was just, I remember that. And I remember the Lion King number was, and as a redhead, I remember that an Annie number at one point.
Yes.
But they're just
still there.
Good to know, because it's also a good one.
Yeah.
But it's just so funny to take those shows, and it's something anyone can relate to, whether you've seen it or not, and it's still hilarious.
Yeah. That's, I say, you only have to know that the show exists to enjoy the parody. Very excited. Come to Forbidden Broadway.